Okay, the main grammar point here is how we can express future using both present and werden. So first let's take a look which forms in here are referring to future events. Sie schaut, she looks, this is not. Morgen ist das vorbei, morgen. So tomorrow it's over. Morgen ist das vorbei. So if we are adding a time expression within the sentence, we can simply say, das mache ich nicht. Das werde ich nicht machen. So I'm not going to do that. Nächste Woche bin ich frei. Oder nächsten Monat tue ich das. Or something of the sort. So the thing is, if you're adding the time expression and then you conjugate sign in present, you're already implying it's going to happen in the future. So just as in here, morgen ist es vorbei. We can also say morgen wird es vorbei sein, but it's not as common. So it's just as in English, right? In English we can also refer to future with present, like tomorrow I'm doing this, tomorrow I'm doing that. So, morgen wird es vorbei sein. That would be the other alternative. Morgen ist es vorbei, morgen wird es vorbei sein. When we use werden, we're going to conjugate werden and leave the other verb in its normal version, in its infinitive version. And here we have vielleicht wird das nächste Jahr besser als dieses. So, maybe will the next year. Well, this is another function of werden actually. Sometimes werden can mean turn or get, right? That something becomes in some way. So here, that's the function vielleicht wird. So maybe next year turns or gets better than this. No? So that's another function of werden. Back here, nur noch einige Stunden und das Jahr ist vorbei. We could also reformulate using werden. So das Jahr, how can we reformulate? Das Jahr wird vorbei sein. A simple example, morgen kommen wir. Morgen kommen wir. Oder morgen werden wir kommen. So just look at the patterns. Remember that the verb is going to remain in the same form and only werden is going to be conjugated. Easiest ones, ich werde, du wirst, er, sie, es wird, so on, right? Wir werden, sie werden, ihr werdet. Another relevant grammar point from here is verb on the second place, so don't forget. Vielleicht wird das bla bla bla. Morgen ist es bla bla bla. So let's convert this. Let's change the tense into future. Sie wird. So we're talking about her. Sie wird, let's say soon. Sie wird bald auf den Kalender schauen. Auf den Kalender schauen. Right? So infinitive verb instead of sie schaut. This is present. Sie wird. Sie wird. But if we want to add a word like vielleicht oder no, we can say vielleicht wird sie bla 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 auf etwas schauen. Und why is the order so important? If you say vielleicht schaut wird sie, it doesn't sound good just as in English, right? Maybe she will look at. So just as in English, we say maybe she will look at. We need will before the rest, right? Will look at. If we say maybe she will. So that's not grammatically correct and you can see it that way. So that's why wird comes before schauen. Take a look at the other function of werden. Now, es wird kälter. It's getting colder. Es wird kälter. Oder es wird wärmer. It's getting or it gets, as literally it. So it gets, it's getting. Connected speech also, wird das nächste Jahr. So without stopping here, don't say wird das, just wird das nächste Jahr. So what will the new year bring us? Was wird das neue Jahr? Was wird uns das neue Jahr bringen? Was wird uns das neue Jahr bringen? We can also ask, was bringt uns das neue Jahr? Das neue Jahr. right? Sometimes it's more appropriate to use werden. So in this case, it's more accurate to use this because it's still not, it hasn't come, this new year, it hasn't come yet. Or was bringt uns das neue Jahr is literally what brings us the new year, right? So just pay attention in the context that you see werden and the context that you see a present form that is probably being used to express something in the future. And last but not least, one of the very few lists that it's worth memorizing in German is that list of the prepositions. So which prepositions are always followed by accusative and which are always followed by dative preposition über, ohne, auf, and so on. But yeah, I recommend you check a list if you want to see that in more detail. Dative like zu, mit, aus, von. And again, the best way that I recommend you to learn them is to see them in action, in actual content for native children, right, in German. So wie WikiHow in German or Geolino, or expose yourself to as much German as possible. And you will no longer require to memorize by heart and make many mistakes. Like, just try to expose yourself to as much German as possible. That's always the main tip that I give if you really want to internalize something. Expose yourself to it in as many contexts as possible. And again, don't overdo it. Don't try to translate absolutely everything. Just ignore a lot so you can spend your time in things and structures and functions that you can easily recognize from the context or from the pictures to do this pattern finding the best possible way.